So let's start with the definition. For our purposes here, a marriage-friendly therapy combines competence in the practice of couples therapy with respect for marriage and a value orientation that supports lifelong commitment in a throwaway culture. So that's how I'm sure somebody else in the world used the term marriage-friendly before me, but I don't know who did. So for our purposes, I coined the term, and this is really what I mean by it. The elements of this, it's a competent practice because if you're not actually good at this work, it doesn't matter that your values are pro-commitment if people are not going to do well in your care. Sort of like you want a caring, competent surgeon, not just a caring surgeon. Somebody who can hold your hand as you die isn't really what you're looking for. I say couples therapy because a lot of the techniques of this work really apply to any couple who are in conflict or in distress with each other, whether they're married or not. We'll be talking about the skills in managing a session. They apply to any. I mean, these could be siblings you're working with, adult parents and children. A lot of those techniques will apply. The respect for marriage, and here I want to recognize the diversity of values and approaches to marriage. We have folks who are probably from religious settings where same-sex marriage is against the beliefs of the congregation. We have folks like you who have worked with same-sex couples. And so feel free to apply these words in ways that make sense to you. For me, the difference between marriage therapy and couples therapy really is about when people have made a lifelong commitment to each other. There are certain things that I do with those couples that I don't necessarily do with couples who have not made that commitment. Okay, the moral aspect of this about commitment kicks in for me when people have made that permanent, lifelong commitment. If they are cohabiting but not married and have not made that lifelong commitment, that's a different situation in my value orientation. They owe each other respect, they owe each other honesty, but they do not owe each other until death do us part. They do not owe each other that I will be there to care for you as you grow old and frail. Okay? And they are in a position where if they decide, from my point of view, that they meet somebody who they think would be a better lifelong mate, they owe the person they have not made that commitment to honesty and not cheating on them, but they could exit. If they have made that lifelong commitment and they're having an outside relationship that threatens that commitment, for me, that's a different situation. Now, they're going to make their decision. I'm not going to make that decision for them, but this is where the values of lifelong commitment in a throwaway culture kick in. The line about respect for marriage, really, I didn't want to put a lot of jargon in there, but for me, this is also respect for marriage as a social institution. Just like I respect parenting as a social institution. I don't only talk about I respect people who take care of children. There's something about parenthood that deserves our support in our society, and for me, marriage is an institution that deserves our support. So this will all play out in really what I really mean by this, and then we'll have dialogue as we go. But I just did want to say that's what I mean. It's really competence and respect for marriage and for lifelong commitment. And that may seem to some of you like a no-brainer. Wouldn't everybody say that? But we could actually, in a lot of settings, we could now proceed to have a 3-hour debate about whether this support for marriage and lifelong commitment interferes, it means that the therapist will prescribe what people should do, that the therapist is a marriage advocate and tries to bar the door to divorce for people, none of which is true in my view. But The field of psychotherapy has largely adopted neutrality about the outcomes of marriage and couples therapy. And just so you know, going into it, and we'll be spending a lot more time on this, I am a critic of the neutrality approach, just as I would be a critic of somebody saying they're neutral about whether parents are able to continue to raise their children or put them in foster care. Sometimes, sadly, unfortunately, the best thing is for children to be removed from the home and go into foster care. Life is hard. Sometimes that happens. But that's not, I don't go into working with families with that as on the table as, well, these parents raise the kids, the state raises the kids. I certainly want to try to help the family, if I can, manage to raise the children. And so when I approach marriage therapy, I approach it with the same approach, the same idea, that if it's possible for these folks to work out their original commitment, I'm interested to see if that can happen. It can't always happen. Sometimes in some sad situations, it's best that they not. But I'm not neutral. So we'll be spending a lot more time on that.